July 30th, 1899, Volume 2, Do Not Judge Your Neighbor. It continues almost always in the same way. This morning, as Jesus transported me outside of myself according to his usual way, we passed through the midst of many people, and the majority of them were intent on judging other people's actions without looking at their own. My beloved Jesus told me, the surest means to be upright with one's neighbor is to not look at all at what they are doing, because looking, thinking, and judging is all the same. Besides, by looking at his neighbor, one comes to defraud his own soul. Therefore it happens that he is not upright either with himself, or with his neighbor, or with God. After this I said to him, "My only good, it has been a while since you gave me even just a kiss." And so we kissed each other. Then, almost wanting to correct me, he added, "My daughter, what I recommend to you is to preserve and cherish my words, because my word is eternal and pure, as I am myself. And by preserving it in your heart and profiting from it, you will have your sanctification and will receive an eternal splendor as recompense, which is produced by my word. By doing otherwise, your soul would receive a void, and you would remain my debtor." July 30th, 1900, Volume 3, Luisa Stops the Sword of Justice. I spent one night and one day being restless. From the very beginning, I felt I was going outside of myself, without being able to find my adorable Jesus. I could see nothing but things that struck terror and fright in me. I could see that a fire was flaring up in Italy, and another one had flared up in China, and little by little, uniting together, they were blending into one. In this fire I could see the king of Italy, who had suddenly died by a trick, and this was the means to ignite and expand the fire. In some I could see a revolt, a tumult, a killing of people. After having seen these things, I felt I was inside myself, and I felt my soul being tortured, to the point of feeling I was dying. More so since I could not see my adorable Jesus. Then, after much waiting, he made himself seen with a sword in his hand, in the act of throwing it over the people. All frightened, and made a little daring, I took the sword in my hand, telling him, "Lord, what are you doing? Don't you see how many disasters will occur if you throw this sword? What grieves me the most is that I see that you are putting Italy in the middle. Ah, Lord, placate yourself. Have pity on your images. And if you say that you love me, spare me this bitter sorrow." And while saying this, I held on to that sword as tightly as I could. Heaving a sigh, all afflicted, Jesus said to me, "My daughter, let it go. Let it fall upon the people, for I can take no more." And I, holding it more tightly, "I cannot let it go. I do not have the heart to do it." And he, "Have I not told you many times that I am forced not to let you see anything? Otherwise I am not free to do what I want?" And while saying this, he lowered his arm with the sword, and placed himself in the act of calming his fury. After a little while he disappeared from me, and I was left with the fear that, who knows, without letting me see it, he might pull the sword away from me and throw it over the people. Oh God, what a heartbreak, the mere remembering. July 30th, 1901, Volume 4, Pride Has Ruined the World. The Virtue of Humility. As I was in my usual state, blessed Jesus transported me outside of myself into the midst of many people. What blindness! Almost all were blind, and a few of short sight. Only very few appeared like the sun in the midst of the stars, with extremely sharp sight, all intent on the divine sun. And this sight was conceded to them because it was fixed in the light of the humanate word. All compassion, Jesus told me, "My daughter, how pride has ruined the world. It has reached the point of destroying that small light of reason which all carry with them at birth. Know, however, that the virtue which most exalts God is humility, and the virtue which most exalts the creature before God and men is humility." Having said this, he disappeared. Later he came back all panting and afflicted, and he added, "My daughter, 3 terrible chastisements are about to happen." And he disappeared like a flash, without giving me the time to tell him one word. July 30th, 1904, Volume 6, The Detachment That Priests Must Have. This morning, blessed Jesus was not coming, and I, finding myself outside of myself, went round and round in search of my highest and only good. And not finding him, my soul felt itself dying at each instant. But what increased my torment was that while I felt I was dying, I would not die. For if I could die, I would reach my intent to be forever in the center, God. O separation, how bitter and painful you are! There is no pain that can be compared to you. O divine privation! You consume. You pierce. You are a 2-edged sword that cuts on one side and burns on the other. The pain you give is immense as is God. Now, while wandering about, I found myself in purgatory, and my sorrow and my crying seemed to increase the sorrow of those poor souls deprived of their life, God. Among them there seemed to be quite a few priests, one of whom seemed to be suffering more than the others, and he said to me, "My grave sufferings come from the fact that in life I was very attached to family interests, to earthly things, and I had a little attachment to some people. This produces so much evil for the priest as to form an iron shell covered with mud that enwraps him like a garment, and only the fire of purgatory and the fire of the privation of God, which is such that, compared to it, the first fire disappears, can destroy this shell. Oh, how much I suffer! My pains are unutterable. Pray, pray for me." I felt even more tormented, and I found myself inside myself. Later I saw just the shadow of blessed Jesus, and he told me, "My daughter, what were you searching for? For you there are no other reliefs and helps but me alone." He disappeared like a flash, and I was left saying, "Ah, he himself tells me this, that he alone is everything for me, and yet he has the courage to leave me without, deprived of him." July 30th, 1922, Volume 14. Luisa feels repugnance in letting the writings come out. Laments of Jesus. In letting copying being done from my writings, in obedience to the confessor, of that which Jesus had told me about virtues, I wanted to have it copied without saying that it was Jesus who had told me that. And he, on coming, displeased, said to me, "My daughter, why do you want to hide me? Am I perhaps a dishonored person, that you do not want to mention my name? When one speaks about a good, a saying, a work, a truth from a dishonored person, one does not want to say who that person is, so as not to cause the loss of the esteem, of the glory, of the prestige, and of the effect contained in that good, in that saying, and so forth. In fact, if one says who the person is, it will not be appreciated and will lose all its beauty, since others will know that the source from which it comes deserves no appreciation. On the other hand, if he is a good and honored person, first one mentions the name of that person, so as to make whatever he said or did stand out more and be more appreciated, and then talks about what he did or said. So, do I not deserve that my name be placed before my words? Ah, how badly you treat me. I did not expect this sorrow from you. Yet I have been so generous with you. I have manifested to you many things about me. I have let you know many things, and the most intimate ones about me, which I have not done with others. You should have been more generous in making me known, instead so sparing. Others would have manifested the little I told them by trumpets, in order to make me known and loved. You, instead, want to hide me. I don't like this at all." Confused and humiliated to the summit, I said to him, "My Jesus, forgive me. You were right. It is because of the great repugnance I feel. This putting my will into how I should come out tortures me. Have pity on me, give me more strength and grace, and make my heart larger, so that I may never again give you this sorrow. And Jesus, I bless you, so that your heart may receive more grace, and may be more generous in making me known and loved." July 30th, 1923, Volume 16. The soul who enters into the divine will is like the flower which exposes itself to the sun. She receives from God all his divine characteristics and the likeness to her Creator. I was fusing myself in the holy divine will, and my sweet Jesus came and told me, "My daughter, every time the soul enters my will to pray, to work, and to do other things, she receives as many divine colors, one more beautiful than the other. Don't you see how many variety of colors and of beauty nature contains? These are the shadows of the variety of colors and beauty which my divinity contains. But how do plants and flowers acquire such variety of colors? To whom did I give the office to color so many different plants with so many different colors? To the sun. Its light and its heat contain fecundity and variety of colors, such as to embellish the whole earth. And if only the plant exposes itself to the kisses of its light, to its embraces, and to its heat, the flower blooms, and as though returning to it the kiss and the embrace, it receives the shades of the colors and forms its beautiful complexion. Now the soul who enters into my will symbolizes the flower which exposes itself to receive the kiss and the embrace of the sun, to receive the different colors which the sun contains. And by returning them, she receives the different colors of divine nature. She is really the celestial flower which the eternal sun, by the breath of its light, has colored so well as to perfume heaven and earth, and delight with its beauty the very divinity and the whole celestial court. The rays of my will empty her of what is human, and fill her with what is divine. And so one can see in her the beautiful rainbow of my attributes. Therefore, my daughter, enter often into my will, in order to receive the tones and the different colors of the likeness to your Creator. July 30th, 1927, Volume 22, How Life is in the Incessant Motion. How this motion produces the spring. The value of the interior acts. I was following the holy divine volition, but always with the hard nail of being without my highest good, Jesus. And I thought to myself, what good comes to me by following the acts of the supreme Fiat, when I am without he who issued the whole creation with a supreme accent of his volition? To follow his will and not to see him, to see his works that speak of him, and not to be clasped in his arms, is an indescribable pain. It is a wound that bleeds continuously. But while I was thinking of this, my beloved Jesus moved in my interior and told me, "My daughter, life is in the continuous motion. Everything that comes from God must possess a motion. So there is not one thing created by us that does not move. Heavens and earth, sun and sea, they all move with such order and continuous velocity as to never stop. If they did stop, life would cease, and the good they do would also cease. At the most, they would remain like painted pictures that are unable to do good to anyone. A good, an act, can only be called true good when it has its incessant motion. This is why our divine being is perfect in all our acts, because it has its continuous motion. It never ceases to do and to give good. And if it did cease, which cannot be, the life of good would cease. Now our will, life and perfect echo of our divine being, is incessant motion, and therefore it is perfect good, and a good that can give itself to all. When a good is incessant, all can take it. Its continuous motion makes it possess the spring of inexhaustibility. Therefore one who must live in my divine will must possess the echo of my will, and with incessant motion follow its acts and the good that comes to you, that places you in the order of the divine motion, moves you with enchanting rapidity, and goes around together with all created things. Your acts are inexhaustible, and all can take the good of them, because they come from the spring of the eternal Fiat. And do you think it is trivial to do a good that always springs? And this is the cause for which in creatures one cannot see true and perfect goods, because their virtues are interrupted, and as they lose the incessant motion of a virtue, the life of the good of it already ceases. They lose the taste, the pace, the strength, because they do not possess the incessant motion, and so the life of the virtue is not formed in them, nor that act that always springs, but rather something superficial and passing. So how can they give the good of those virtues to all, if they themselves do not possess their life and spring, which are such that, while they give to others, they are never exhausted and lose nothing? Does the sun perhaps lose anything by giving its light to all? Certainly not, because it possesses the spring of light, and its motion of giving light is incessant. Therefore, my daughter, in my divine will, your acts, your prayers, your asking for its kingdom, must have the incessant motion to be able to impetrate for all that the divine Fiat be known and loved by all. Then after this I was following the most holy and adorable divine will in my interior, and my sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, the interior acts of a soul who does the will of God are free from any evil and shadow of defect. God alone is witness of an interior act, And while no one points at her, no one looks at her, no one speaks of her, God, as witness of the work of the creature, there where no one is given to penetrate, in the interior of the creature, points at her, looks at her, and speaks to the whole of heaven, and many times also to the earth, of the great portents of the interior work of this creature. To be pointed at, to be looked at by God, to make him speak of a creature, is the greatest act and honor that she can receive, and cannot be excluded from the great works that God will accomplish through her. The interior acts are wounds, darts, arrows to the divine bosom. They are celestial messengers that are released from the creature and fly to her Creator, bringing the mark of glory, of love, and of pleasing only He who has created her. In fact, who sees, who listens to, who appreciates all the things you do in your interior? No one. I alone am witness of them, listen to them, and appreciate them. This is why in our greatest works we choose souls who, in appearance, show nothing great and marvelous, but interior souls who are unblemished either by human views or by the clamorous noise, the glory, the self-esteem that the external works bring. In fact, in redemption we choose a simple virgin, without external splendors, but she had her interior speaking, and was able to say so much, one-on-one with her Creator, as to conquer him and obtain redemption. Now we have done the same for the kingdom of the divine Fiat. We have chosen another one, all interior, who will say much, and will pray God to concede the longed-for kingdom. The external acts, also good and holy, cannot please me like the interior acts, because the external ones are almost always impregnated with the air of self-glory, with human esteem, and sometimes also with blame. And a poor heart feels within itself the effects of the praises or of the blame after it has made sacrifices. And what is human enters the field and invests the acts of the creature with its tenebrous air, and therefore they do not reach me as pure as they should be. On the other hand, an interior act is neither blamed nor praised by anyone, and what is human has no way in. Since she does not feel watched by anyone, to the soul herself it seems that she does nothing great, and therefore her acts are all impregnated with celestial air. Therefore be attentive, and let your interior always go around in my will. July 30th, 1929, Volume 26. Difference between one who operates in a saintly way in the human order and one who operates in the divine will. How without it one has the strength of a child. How all evil is of the human will. My poor mind keeps going around and within the supreme Fiat, and oh, how many surprises, how many wonders of this will so holy. My little intelligence gets lost within its immensely vast sea, and many things I feel incapable of narrating, nor do I have the terms to do it. And therefore I feel like someone who ate a food or saw something beautiful and does not know what they are called. If the divine volition did not make a prodigy in making me say what it manifests to me, how many more things would I leave inside its very sea, unable to say anything? So while I felt dissolved in the divine Fiat, my always lovable Jesus, making himself felt in my interior, told me, "My daughter, what difference between those who operate the virtues in a saintly way, but in the human order, and one who operates the virtues in the divine order of my divine will? As the first ones practice the virtues, these remain separated among themselves, in such a way that the diversity of their acts appears. One virtue appears as patience, another as obedience, a third one as charity. Each of them has its distinction, unable to fuse together so as to be able to form one single act that gives of the divine and embraces eternity and infinity. On the other hand, for one who operates in my divine will, its light has the communicative and unifying virtue, such that fusing together, because they are all done within the source of its light, they form one single act with innumerable effects, such as to embrace the very Creator with the infinity of its light. Symbol of this is the sun, because it is one, because it possesses the source of light that is never extinguished. It embraces the earth, and with its innumerable effects it gives all colors and communicates the life of its light to everyone and to everything. The unifying strength possesses the communicative virtue in such a way that, if they want to, all can take a good that is placed at everyone's disposal. On the other hand, one who operates in the human order is symbolized by the lights of the low world. Even though there are many of them, they do not have the virtue of dispelling the darkness of the night and of forming full daylight, or of embracing the whole earth with such great multiplicity of light. Therefore they can be called personal, local light, and at time and circumstance. Oh, if all knew the great secret of operating in my divine volition, they would compete so as not to let anything escape them that would not pass from within its most pure light. I continued to follow the divine will, and my sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, the creature without my will is like a child who has no strength to be able to sustain a weight, or to do work so useful as to allow him to support himself, his little existence. And if one wanted to force him to lift a heavy object, or to sustain a work, the child, seeing himself impotent and without strength, maybe would try, but in seeing that he cannot even move that object, nor sustain that work, the poor little one would burst into tears, and would do nothing about it. And in order to put him in feast, it would be enough to give him a candy. On the other hand, one who possesses my divine will has the strength of an adult man, or rather the divine strength, and if he were told to lift the heavy object, without becoming troubled, he takes it as if it were nothing, while the poor little one would remain crushed under it. If one wants him to sustain a work, he will put himself in feast because of the gain and the profit he will be given, and if one wanted to give him a candy, he would despise it and would say, "Give me the just profit for my work, for I must live from it." See, then, one who has my divine will has sufficient strength for anything, so everything is easy for her. Even suffering, as she feels strong, she looks at it as a new gain. Why are many unable to bear anything, and it seems that a child's weakness follows them? It is the strength of my divine will that is missing. This is the cause of all evils. Therefore be attentive, my daughter, never to go out of my divine will. Then I continued to do my acts in the divine Fiat, and as I arrived at the point when it called to life, to daylight, the sovereign Queen of Heaven, I thought to myself, in creating the most holy Virgin, God not only enriched her beautiful soul with many privileges, but her nature also he must have transformed in order to render it as pure and holy as it is. And my beloved Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, there was nothing to add to her nature, because it was not the human nature that sinned, but the human will. In fact, the human nature was at its place, just as it came out of our creative hands. And therefore we used that same nature of other creatures in creating the Virgin. What contaminated itself in man was his will, and since this human nature was animated by this rebellious will that dwelled in the human nature, It participated and remained contaminated. So, once the divine will and the human are placed in harmony, giving dominion and regime to the divine as it is wanted by us, the human nature loses the sad effects and remains as beautiful as it came out of our creative hands. Now in the Queen of Heaven, all our work was on her human will, that received with joy the dominion of ours. And our will, finding no opposition on her part, operated prodigies of graces, and by virtue of my divine volition, she remained sanctified and did not feel the sad effects and the evils that the other creatures feel. Therefore, my daughter, once the cause is removed, the effects end. Oh, if my divine will enters into creatures and reigns in them, it will banish all evils in them, and will communicate to them all goods, to soul and body. July 30th, 1933, Volume 32. The one who does the divine will forms her dwelling there, that serves as custodian, as defense, and as comfort of the divine will itself. Its knowledges will form its life. I am always prey of the divine volition. I feel its palpitating life in me as bearer of goodness, of speaking light, that while it is mute it speaks by deeds. It speaks by always loving me. It speaks by forming its life. It speaks by making its life grow. It speaks by making itself felt. Oh, blessed muteness that knows how to convert into ancient voices your sanctity, your love, all your being into operating voice. But while my mind was lost in the Fiat, my sweet Jesus, surprising me with his brief little visit, told me, "My blessed daughter, you must know that one who does my divine will forms the dwelling of my supreme volition. And as a dwelling has no right, nor is it owner to do what it wants and only serves as custodian, as defense, and as comfort for the one who dwells there, so the soul loses her right in the divine right. She cedes the right of command voluntarily to my divine will, and remains as custodian, as defense, and as comfort of my divine volition, that develops her life as best pleases it. Now, by doing mine, the human will not only changes into the dwelling for mine, but she will remain an honored dwelling that my Fiat will decorate with divine trimmings. This dwelling of hers will form its royal palace, in which the angels themselves will remain amazed. It will make a display of its love, of its sanctity, of its light, of its uncreated beauty. It will form its life and its operating life in the will of the creature. For us, operating great things are rights that we have in our nature. Our power has no limits. It can do everything. It can reach everywhere. And if we do not do many things, it is because they do not want them, not because we cannot. But arming our power to render us operating in the brief circle of the human will, we can say that we place more love, more divine art, more power, because we must restrict in her what is immense in us. Therefore our love displays even more in rendering us operating in the creature, and she will feel my will dwelling in her, in a way that she will feel its divine life flow everywhere, in her works, in her steps, in her heart, in her mind, even in her voice. She will form so many rooms of her being in order to give the opportunity to my divine will of letting it now speak, now operate, now walk, now love, in sum, whatever it wants. So I continued to think about the so many truths that Jesus had told me about his divine will, and my beloved good Jesus added, "My daughter, every life has need of nourishment, not only this, but of material adapted to forming that life. She must have her beginning, her growth. Only in us do things have no beginning, but in the creature everything has its beginning. Therefore, in order to have the beginning of the operating life of my divine will in the creature, it must administer the first material in order to form it. But do you know what these first materials have been? The first knowledges and truths that I have manifested to you about my divine will. They have formed the humor, the heat, and the first act of life in order to give beginning to its life. Now, after having formed the beginning of this life, it was necessary to form it, raise it, and nourish it, such that as my manifestations on my will followed, some have served to form it, some to raise it, and some to nourish it. If I had not continued my speaking about it, it would remain suffocated, or yet a life without growth, because it feeds itself with nothing other than only the truths and knowledges that pertain to it. See, therefore, the necessity of my long speaking about my fiat. It was necessary in order to make it known to the creature. It was necessary in order to form its life, and not let it lack the divine nourishment of its own truths that alone can serve in order to nourish it, because outside of the creature my will has no need of anything or anyone. By itself, in its nature, it is life, food, nourishment, and everything. On the other hand, wanting the creature's cooperating part, by way of knowledges and truths that pertain to it, it forms its life more or less according to what she knows. And these knowledges form an indissoluble marriage between the one and the other. The substance, the heat, the growth, the food of the life of my will in the creature. This is why I return to my speaking, because it serves my will in you, and in order for you to make it more known, loved, and appreciated by yourself. Therefore, when creatures will hear that my long speaking, my almost continuous visits, my so many graces, will serve to form the life of my divine will in you, they will no longer marvel about the ways that I have had, about the graces that I have made, about the so many truths that I have said. It was life that had to be formed, and life has need of continuous acts. What life can say that it does not have need of continuous acts? Not one. Works do not have a need of continuous acts, but life needs them. The breath, the heartbeat, the continuous motion. Every day a food that sustains her, a garment that covers her, a dwelling that keeps her secure. See, therefore, how everything that I have done and will do was necessary for me in order to form this life of my divine will, and was necessary for you in order to receive it and possess it, and to not let it lack anything that is befitting of a divine life. When I act with divine wisdom, order, and harmony. Could one say to you that this life of my divine will needs to be formed in you without making it known to you, without giving you the divine materials in order to form it, and the continuous food in order to make it grow? I do not know how to do these things. If I say that I want something, I must give everything that is necessary, and in a superabundant way, in order that the creature would be able to do what I want. And since creatures do not know my way of acting, they marvel, they doubt it, and certain ones reach to condemning my work and the creature, who I have the aim of completing my great designs that will help the whole entire world, because the life of my divine will operating in the creature is not subject to either dying or ending, but it will have its perpetuation in the midst of the human generations. Therefore let me do, and always continue your flight in my divine will. July 30th, 1938, Volume 36. How in Heaven There Are Different Roles. Each blessed will have a God all for himself. How Jesus loved us in all created things. Spontaneity of Jesus in the good. My poor mind is often invested by the ardor of love of the divine will. Its marvels are always surprising, one more beautiful than the other. Then my adorable Jesus surprising me with his short little visit, with a love that enraptured my little soul, told me, "My little daughter of my will, the prodigies, the marvels, the enchanting scenes I make in one who lives in my will are various and so beautiful and enchanting that nobody can imitate them. You must know that in heaven there are innumerable tasks, but those prepared for the souls who will have lived more beautifully and distinctly than others will possess divine, enchanting harmonies and scenes, joys always new that will arise from the depth of my will in which they lived. They will have in their power joys and happiness, always new. They will form them in their power, as many as they want, since my Fiat has the virtue of creating always new joys. These tasks will be the new enchantment of that celestial residence. Now, I want to tell you of another surprise, an even more beautiful one. In heaven, each blessed will have me inside of themselves, have me as his own creator, king, father, glorifier. But he will also have me outside of himself, really close to him, as if I would carry him in my arms. We will love together and delight together. I will not be a God for all, but a God for each one. Better still, he will keep me bilocated inside and outside of himself, and I will possess him inside and outside of myself. They will possess me inside and outside, as if I was entirely for each and every one of them. With one God for all, happiness would not be full. Someone would be close, someone else far away, some on the left, some on the right. Therefore some could enjoy my caresses, some could not. Some would feel more loved and delighted by my close presence, someone else would not. But by being inside and outside of each and every one, we will never lose sight of each other. We will enjoy love closely, not from far away. And the more we will have loved and known each other on earth, the more we will love each other in heaven. Moreover, what I give to those who lived in my will on earth will be so great that all the blessed will enjoy doubled happiness. It is true that I have my throne, from which seas of joys arise, widening the whole celestial fatherland. But my love is not satisfied if I don't bilocate myself and descend in order to be one-on-one, single to single, with my beloved creature, so that we may love each other more and delight together. Also, how could I live far away from one who lives in my will? If between us there is the inseparability of will and love, if one is the love with which we love each other and one is the will with which we operate, how could I possibly live even a step away from her? Furthermore, you must know that one who lives in our will cannot be separated from anyone, even from our created things, since as she does her act in it, she calls and embraces everyone in her act, imposing herself on all by doing what she does. Therefore, in one act done in my will, I receive all, even my own creation, to love me and glorify me." After this he added, "My daughter, I am like a king who has many queens, and they love each other with such love that one cannot live without the other. This king forms many sumptuous palaces, puts music and the most delightful scenes in them, to make his queen happy, and himself together with her. Then I bilocate myself for each one so that all can possess me, being delighted by my possession. The king cannot bilocate himself to make his queens happy, and he has to content himself with being now with one, now with another. This makes their love unhappy, and they feel tyrannized by a broken love, never completely enjoyed. And if I did not possess the virtue to give myself to each one of them, as if I were only for her, my love would make me unhappy, having to leave the creature without me even for one instant. I am instead a king who always courts his queens, and they court me. If this were not the case, the fullness of joy would be lacking in the celestial residence. Then I continued my round in the divine Fiat, and I paused on what Jesus did while on earth. My sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, it is hard for me to be silent with one who lives in my will. My love always wants to say and reveal where it reaches, and in how many ways it loves her. Now you must know that while I was on earth, there was not one thing that I did without looking for my beloved creature, kissing her, squeezing her to my heart, looking at her with paternal tenderness. So if I met with the sun, I found my beloved creatures in its light, since having created it for them, by right I could claim my lordship in its light, and nobody can claim to be lord of a good if he cannot look inside of it. Therefore I found my creatures inside the sun, and I kissed them. I hugged them and I squeezed them to my heart, and, keeping them also inside of me, I kissed them outside and inside of me, squeezing them so tightly as to render them part of my own life. If I was in the wind, I ran to kiss her. If I drank some water, even in this I could find her. And oh, with how much love I looked at them and kissed them. Even in the air I breathed, I met them all, feeling their breath, and in every breath I buried them in kisses of love. And therefore, in every created thing, in the starry sky, in the sea, in the plants, in the flowers, in everything, I met my beloved creatures, to redouble in them my love and make them feast, to hug them again and tell them, "Your unhappiness is over, because I have come on earth from heaven to make you happy. I am the one who has taken your unhappiness upon myself, you may be certain. A God who loves you will be your fortune, your defense, your powerful help." The most beautiful characteristic of my love is spontaneity, to the extent that in the very suffering they gave me during the Passion, I formed those pains in myself first, loving them, covering them with kisses. Then I passed them to the minds of the creatures so that they would inflict them upon my humanity. There was no pain given to me by the creatures that was not wanted by me first. The creatures came in secondary order, so my pains were soaked by my love, covered with my ardent kisses, and they possessed the creative virtue of making souls rise again to love me. The truth can be seen in spontaneity. A forced love cannot be called true. It loses freshness, beauty, and purity. And oh, how inconstant and unhappy in the sacrifices it renders creatures. While it seems that they love, they are unhappy and embittered, since this is a love forced either by necessity or by people from whom they cannot be freed. Forced love makes slaves out of the poor creatures. My love instead was free. It was wanted by me. Neither did I need anybody. I loved, I sacrificed myself to the extent of giving my life because I wanted it. Therefore, when I see in the soul a spontaneous love, I feel enraptured and I say, "My love and yours hold each other's hands, so we can love each other with one love." After this he added, "My daughter, one who lives in my will is kept in my divine room. She possesses all our goods. Strength and light are in her power. On the other hand, one who does my will forms the way to arrive to enter it. There are dangers on the way, and she has to be exposed to the cold and the frost. She won't find water ready to drink, good food to feed herself, or a bed in which to rest. One can say she is like a poor wayfarer who never arrives at her home. What a difference there is between one who lives in my will and one who does my will! But it is still necessary to form the way, living resigned, doing my will in all circumstances of life, in order to be able to live in my will. Here she will find her divine room, the center of her rest, the exile changed into fatherland. End of July 30th. Fiat.